Hello, welcome to another tutorial video. We're on the fourth one now in this series. Before I go into the question and then subsequently the other questions, I just want to give you a little bit of background about the actual exam. It's going to be 2 hours and 15 minutes, 1 hour for section B and 1 hour 15 minutes for section A. The reason you get slightly longer in section A is because you have to read, and in the reading section you're going to have 3 items to read, and they're going to be linked pieces of non-fiction. Linked means they're going to cover the same theme, whether it's recycling or mobile phone use or traveling, etc, etc. And non-fiction means that it's going to be something like an advert or an article or a section of a memoir, etc. It's not going to be a piece of fiction in terms of poetry or a story, etc. You really want to focus on analysing the language of newspapers primarily and adverts, if I was going to say any of them, and you're probably doing that anyway, just reading newspapers, etc. But try and go through the newspapers bearing in mind questions like the ones you're going to see, because in the new GCSE, the great thing about it, I think, is that they've cemented the type of question and the marks per question. So question 1, for as long as they choose not to change it, is always going to be 8 marks, and it's always going to be a question on retrieving the key points being made. So basically you're to read the item and retrieve the key points in light of the question. So what we've got here is, as we've only had 2 sets of exams about this, 2 sets of exams for this, what I've got here is the questions from both exams, and you can see all the sections that I've highlighted are mirrored. What do you learn about something and what? What do you learn about something and what? So you know there are a couple of points that you're going to be picking out, referencing the first thing that's mentioned, and then if possible the second thing that's mentioned as well. And what do you learn is the setup for this question, seemingly, which is basically saying retell or tell again or make clear. That's all you have to do. It's the easiest part of the exam. A lot of students spend a lot of time revising for this. I just know in questions I've been asked in classes over the years, they always want to, this is the purpose question. You know, what's the purpose of something being given to you? Well, what are you supposed to learn from it? What are you supposed to take from it? And a lot of people always kind of get really hooked up on it. This is not the hardest question by a long way. If I was going to concentrate my efforts on anything, I'd concentrate on section 4. The only thing you have to do for this is you have to be able to follow points and arguments being made. You have to pick out points relevant to the question. You need to give 4 to 6 points with evidence. Less than 4 would be too little. More than 6 would probably be too vague. You might not have answered. If you're trying to get an A, if you write 6 points, well, that's going to be more than enough. You might think, well, because there's 8 marks, I need to write 8 points. It doesn't really work directly like that. If you pick out 4 and you have 4 excellent points, you could still get the 8 marks, I'm told. But you can go safer with 6, just in case you're. It depends how many you can pick out. Obviously, don't feel pressured into trying just to write as much as you can. If you do think you pick up 6 things easily, then just make sure that you've got the nuances and the depth in what you're trying to pick out. But try not to go, because you'll generally find that there might be an umbrella point which other stuff comes under. So you can actually just mention that in the point rather than making a whole new point about it, and we'll look at that when we look at the exemplar examples a little later on. And then always try and you have to use a quotation in whatever you're supporting, and try and make sure it's embedded. That's one of the things that's going to mark your writing slightly higher. Now I just want you to think as you're going through anything with the examiner's point of view in mind. So basically a C grade student is basically saying with their work, is basically saying something to the examiner, and the examiner will be looking at it, and for a C he says, well, I can clearly see that you understand. For an A, I can clearly see that you can pick out the details Okay, now the details are really important. It's not just the argument itself, it's the detail. So if I were to talk about a car, and you just said, okay, can you see a car? And we'd walk into the street and you go, oh yeah, there's a blue car, there's a red car. I'd be like, okay, great. And then I said, pick up the details. And then if that confused you, then that's what you need to start building on. The detailing of a car could be spoilers, could be the way the alloy wheels are, it could be perhaps the tread on the tire, could be the styling, could be a badge that's on it, could be a crack, could be anything. The detailing might be, in this car example, might be something, you know, factory set, something added, or something, you know, of damage. But you've got to pick up the details, and then you've got to look into them with the depth as well. So everything you're doing in F or an A rather than a C is going to be details and depth. So you can go the extra mile. You can look into it with more with more of an analytical eye. You can really understand, and that's what you're trying to get across. So if I was to mention something that would probably be worth keeping in mind for higher grades, is to consider other relevant angles and to infer. So as you're going through, one of the key things that the chief examiner has mentioned in both pieces of feedback he's written for question 1, he's mentioned that students have missed out on the counter arguments in the pieces. Says that's where some people have gone come a cropper, they've come undone with that, and students haven't inferred as much as they're able to. When you're actually rewriting this, that's your chance to actually infer and to drop in what you're taken in by this. You don't need to say, I think this is, but you just kind of mention the summary of the feeling or the idea. So as an example of this, what you might be picking up, let's just say we've got an article, and the article's on losing weight. So for example, we could just say this article is about losing weight. The person is happy that they lost weight. They lost weight because they ran a lot, and that would be my 3 points. That wouldn't really get me even probably a C, even though I'm showing some understanding. I'm not showing any depth in detail or anything. So perhaps in this fictional example, paragraph 1 and 2 were all about calorie counting and the experience in that, and then about exercising, and then perhaps there was an extreme element of stomach stapling as well in there. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for more details. How did they lose the weight? What were the conditions involved, etc. If then perhaps paragraph 3 and 4 talked about a morning routine where the person took supplements, etc., and then a night routine where after they put the child to bed, that's when they went to the gym or something, if another parent was home, and then, you know, how they kept it going during their holiday, etc., and how they looked at motivation, etc. Again, you're looking at all the details. All of that comes under the banner of the umbrella of losing weight. You know, it all can count towards losing weight in this context. But you need to talk about the details and actually just pick out the ideas. And again, as I say, we're going to go through a C grade and an A grade exemplar pieces, and we'll hopefully understand that a little bit more. So paragraph 5 might be where the argument's changed, and I can still pick up on that. So here it might be about the insecurity that the person was feeling and the body image. So this isn't directly to do with how they lost the weight, but it is to do with one of the fallouts of losing weight, or one of the reasons for losing weight. So it's still linked. So you can see or make that connection and infer the link to losing weight that's actually come from this. And then perhaps there's a final point in paragraph 6, and it's, you know, discussing how some people, you know, friends of this person, you know, writing their account in this article might have just said, you know, he'd become obsessed and they were worried about him, etc. And again, that would be looking at it from a different angle, etc. And there's perhaps something to infer on that. So the key points again for doing this, remember, it's always going to be 8 marks. You're always going to have to explain what you have picked up, so you're retrieving the key points. 4 to 6 points are all you'll need, and always use quotations and try and embed them as much as possible. And for the higher grades, try and consider other relevant angles and what you can infer from this.